Very blessed at North Central Church to have just so many incredible people that are in so many different fields, and one of them is Chris Lucchese, and he's not a CPS special agent, he's a DPS special agent, and he's one of our state troopers, and we love Chris and Kristen. They're precious to us, and where he's at and where he works with the state is a very prevalent area, and this is one of the things that he is very well aware of. So we are honored tonight to have him make this presentation because it's going to be a benefit for all of us. And it's something for me, I wanted to hear this. And so for myself, as a church, as a pastor, as a father, as a grandfather. So I want us just tonight, we're just going to open up in prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Father, we love you. We thank you tonight for who you are. We thank you, Jesus, that you love us, Lord, and you care about us. And Lord, tonight as we're talking about things, Lord, that may be uncomfortable in some ways, but God, it's so relevant in so many others that we need to hear. Jesus, we trust you. Lord, we want to be cautious and protective in all things, but you told us to be wise in all that we do. And so, Lord, we ask that you would give us wisdom in every area of our lives, Lord, the things that we're used to doing and sometimes the things we take for granted that we need to be cautious of. God, help us to be resilient, trusting in you, Lord, and led of the Holy Spirit in all things. I love you, Jesus. Bless tonight's presentation. God, just bless and anoint Chris tonight as he shares with us things that we need to hear and know and understand. We ask it all in Jesus' name, amen. Can we give a good love hand clap for Officer Chris?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Larry and the North Central staff family for allowing me to come and speak. This is a subject that is important to me. It's kind of become, very important over the last 2 years. And a quick caveat here before we get going, just to touch on what Pastor Larry said. So some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, obviously, is going to be going over human trafficking, specifically stopping it before it begins. Kind of an introduction thing here. Hopefully you get something out of it. But an important thing is, whereas I'm going to be as tactful as possible, some of the things we're going to talk about may be sensitive. There's going to be some words thrown around that, again, may be a little sensitive. There may be somebody in this room right now that has experienced some of the things we're going to talk about, and it may become upsetting to you. So, by all means, if you need to step out at any time, feel free to. Parents, if you think it starts getting a little too deep, I highly doubt it will. Again, it's going to be as PG as possible. But again, just want to give you that little disclaimer before we get going, okay? All right, so let's get started. So some of our talking points tonight, we're going to go over defining trafficking, what it means, okay? We're going to go over discussing the victims, the perpetrators. We're going to talk about some of the recruitment processes. We're going to talk about some of the cases that I myself and a few of the agents in my squad have worked. And then at the end, kind of a summation, what can we do to avoid being a victim? After we talk about everything, kind of putting it together, and how do we avoid what we're talking about tonight. So I know when I sit in classes throughout my career in the Army or as a law enforcement officer, when I'm watching people give a class to me or give a presentation, I'm always curious about who they are. Who is this person imparting knowledge to me to be talking about what they are. So just real quick about me. Again, my name is Chris Lucchese. I started my career in the military, joined the Army back in 2005, was an infantryman. Did that to about 2010, did a few tours overseas and decided it was time to get out. So I got out in 2010 and joined DPS. The Lord really blessed and gave me a pretty good seamless transition. I think it was like March or April 2010, I got off active duty, and then by August of 2010, I was starting the DPS Academy. So God bless there. So I did my highway patrol time as a trooper on the road from 2010 to January 1, 2011 was my first day on patrol. Right? Beginning of the year, the first day of the year, it was interesting. So I was a trooper from 2011, from the 1st till early 2019. I was a state trooper in Montgomery County, did my patrolling up there, was a corporal there for a little bit, and then in 2019 was promoted into the Criminal Investigations Division where I'm at now. You can see a little bit of what we cover, CID missions at the bottom. We cover human trafficking, which is the squad I'm in. We also work major drugs. We do violent crimes, gangs, and we also cover special investigations, fraud, regulatory things of that nature. So that's a little bit about me. Right now, I'm also being TFO'd onto the FBI task force. The FBI has a crimes against children task force that they run. And because I took a few cases to them, the Lord blessed, and a spot came open, so I'm getting TFO, task force officer, TFO. That's what that means. So I'll be working on the FBI's team. So I'm excited about that, and hopefully the Lord blesses. Okay, so this PowerPoint was made on PowerPoint. It was made on a Windows computer. So it was supposed to, when I go to this slide, it was supposed to, like, on that little line, it's supposed to, like, come up and say, "Why are we here?" But it didn't come up on. It's used to run off Mac. So anyway, that's the only issue that's going to be with this slide. I promise. I checked. So anyway, it's supposed to say, "Why are we here?" Right? Because as Pastor Larry said earlier, it's kind of an odd thing, right? Most people wouldn't think you go to church and you learn about trafficking. So what are we going to talk about? So why are we here? So when I joined, or got promoted into CID and started working in trafficking back in 2019, I was a little naive, I guess, about the victims, where they came from, how it happened. And I always thought, well, maybe they came from places like the bottom, low-income housing, kids that don't have maybe parents at home. Maybe their parents are addicts. They don't have much money. They're susceptible. That's probably where all the victims are coming from. Well, then I think it was like the second case I got, I picked up this case. It was a 13-year-old and 15-year-old juvenile. They had both been trafficked, been recovered already. The case came to my squad, and I got assigned the case. So my job is then to go out. The girls have already been recovered. The investigation, they've already given kind of quasi-outcries. That's how the case got to us. So I go out to interview these two girls. They're both out of Katy. They lived like 5 miles apart from each other. So I was going to go to one house, interview her, talk to her parents, then go to the next and do the same at the next house. Well, the first house I get to, I'm in it's Katy. I drive into this neighborhood and I'm like, man, this is nice. These are like $300,000-$400,000 houses. They look like that house up top. I'm like, seriously? So I go in, I talk to the girl. She's, still recovering, still a little upset. I talk to her parents a little bit, get the evidence I need. I go to the next house. Same thing, it's in Katy. It's just a few miles away. Pull into this neighborhood. It's like, man, this is a nice neighborhood. Another is, again, $250,000, $300,000 house. This girl's parents were divorced, but her dad was there. He cared. She had siblings as well. And then as I progressed in, I was like, I almost started to get annoyed. I hate to admit it, but you almost start to get annoyed at some of the victims sometimes. Like, how did you not know what you were getting involved in? Seriously? Like, I'm here because you didn't see this was coming? And I started to feel kind of bad and kind of had a come to Jesus moment when it's like, well, how can you get upset at these people if nobody's telling them? We live in a different world than we did 15 years ago. With the internet land out there, all these apps, all this, everyone is a click away from another person. So you can't get mad at these victims and adults. Plenty of adults getting caught up too. Well, no one's telling them how this is happening. No one is telling them. I mean, there's obviously stranger danger stuff out there everybody knows about, but some of these recruitment methods that are pretty detailed and intricate, well, if no one's going to tell you, then you can't fault them. So I was like, well, you just need to keep your mouth shut until you maybe go out there and start telling people. So anyway, that's kind of why we're here. So let's get started here. So some misconceptions. So when you hear human trafficking, what do you think? Right. Liam Neeson, right? You think of Taken. It's a good movie, right? Those are awesome movies. It's entertaining. It's really dramatic. But I'll tell you, some of the biggest misconceptions is that is a tiny portion of trafficking. Now, don't get me wrong, it happens. The girl getting snatched at a bus station, getting snatched at the airport, allured by some good-looking French guy who then, invites her to a place that doesn't exist and she gets snatched. That happens, I guess. Very rarely. A majority of the trafficking that happens here. It happens in the neighborhoods. It happens in your kids' schools. It happens in the hotels around Houston, the apartment complexes. It happens in our neighborhoods, in houses like the house I showed you earlier. In your neighborhood, you'd never guess it, but it happens. So we always get so caught up. I remember every now and then I get on my wife's Facebook. I don't have one, but I like to get on hers and see what people talk about. And I see some of these posts that people have. Somebody tied my, they tied my windshield wipers together so I had to get out of my car. So that was somebody trying to traffic me. Well, maybe. Again, most people, it doesn't happen like that. Why? If you're doing something bad, do you want to get caught? Do you want people looking for you? No. You want to be incognito, under the radar, so people aren't looking for you. Most of the trafficking we see, again, are girls, victims are being recruited. They're not getting snatched up, because guess what? Traffickers snatch somebody up, they're going to be hunted. You snatch somebody from a playground, again, it happens, but we're just going to talk about a majority here. So you snatch somebody up at a playground or a bus stop, what happens? The cops get called, reports get filed, and people start looking for that person. The traffickers don't want that. So again, we're gonna, in this presentation, focus on the domestic trafficking that happens right around us that we don't even know what's going on. Keep in mind though, the Liam Neeson stuff does happen, okay? So let's define trafficking. What exactly is it? So every state has their own laws, right? The feds have their own laws. Specifically tonight, we're gonna talk about what does the Texas Penal Code say. Okay, so according to the Texas Penal Code, trafficking is a person commits an offense if the person knowingly, one, traffics another person with the intent that the trafficked person engage in forced labor or services, okay? Labor trafficking. Two, receives a benefit from participating in a venture that involves any activity described by subdivision 1, including by receiving labor or services the person knows are forced labor or services. So again, like a play on labor trafficking. But number 3, this is what we see the most and what I deal with the most. Okay? It traffics another person and through force, fraud, or coercion, causes the trafficked person to engage in conduct prohibited by A through D. Okay? So prostitution, your promotion, your online promotion, your ag promo, your compelling, things of that nature. So, obtained by any means, okay? So you don't have to snatch people up for any of this stuff like this, but this is what we're gonna talk about tonight. And thankfully, when the legislature wrote all this, they added this last part. Force, fraud, or coercion is not needed to change or to charge trafficking when committed against a minor. So in some slides, we'll talk about some of the barriers to trafficking, what makes this stuff difficult, and this right here sometimes makes charging trafficking difficult. Proving force, fraud, or coercion. Thankfully, when we deal with kids, we don't have to worry about that. We just need to prove that they were subjected to any one of the following. So let's talk about societal contributors. Why is this getting so big? Why is it becoming such a problem? Right? I mean, shoot, 20 years ago, you rarely heard of trafficking. I like to think, well, a lot of times when I say to victims and pimps or traffickers when we talk to them now, or just anybody, I like to say that trafficking is the narcotics of the 80s. You know, back in the 80s, narcotics was huge. All the dope flowing up from Central America. If you were a narc, man, you were cool. Well, now we've kind of transitioned. I mean, obviously, dope is still big, but now, as y'all, I'm sure, are well aware of, trafficking is becoming much bigger. So it's a problem that people are, oh, man, this is huge. So why is that? So one of the things, obviously, music and movies. Movies like Pimp, Bossin' Up, Superfly, The Mac, The Candy Tangerine Man. These are movies that actively condone and advocate for pimping and prostituting and trafficking. They make it seem cool, right? Publications like Pimpology. This is a book published by Amazon. It's not published by Amazon, but it's distributed by Amazon. Written by a former trafficker or pimp who is teaching you how to be a good pimp, teaching you rules of the game, teaching you how to be successful, right? And then obviously a sex-crazed culture that we live in. I think we can all agree nowadays we live in a pretty sex-crazed culture, right? So approximately, 30% of all data transferred across the internet is porn. Now, I'm not saying 30% of websites out there are porn. There's like billions of websites. But 30% of the data, approximately, 30% of the data transferred on the internet is porn. Websites like YouPorn. Everybody knows what YouTube is, right? Well, YouPorn is like the devil's version of YouTube. I know that sounds kind of stereotypical at a church. The devil's YouTube. Anyway, but it is. So YouPorn streams 6 times the bandwidth of Hulu. And for those of you who don't know what Hulu is, it's a streaming service. It's like Netflix or Amazon Prime. You can, pay a monthly subscription. You get tens of thousands of videos, movies, TV shows, even live TV. 6 times the bandwidth is Hulu. It's crazy. So what does all that lead to? It leads to a constant demand. There's always a demand. Somebody's going to fill that demand. They're going to see that demand, and they're going to make sure there's a supply. Okay? So getting to some of the victims. Who are the victims? Where do they come from? So victims can be male or female. Okay? Contrary to popular beliefs in different parts of our society, there are 2 genders, male and female, although an overwhelming majority are female. It happens to males, don't get me wrong, but in my experience, an overwhelming majority are female. It can be adults or juveniles. Unfortunately, a good number start out as a juvenile. Unfortunately, when you start this at a young age, and when I say start this, I'm not like you chose it, but if you get caught up in this at a young age, unfortunately, it's going to be easy to go back to it. It's what you know. So, unfortunately, a good number start out as juveniles. Okay? Oftentimes, these victims are highly active on social media. Youth that appear to have little supervision at home. Adults and juveniles with aspirations of independence and success. Again, usually voiced on social media. Okay? And runaways. So, runaways is pretty prevalent. I had no idea that so many kids ran away until I got into this unit. And unfortunately, when these kids that run away get on the streets, there's wolves out there hunting. They know who they're looking for, and runaways are their easiest targets. So a lot of who we deal with, unfortunately, are runaways. Okay? So the recruitment. How do these people get caught up into this? How do some of these children and adults get involved? It starts slow generally, okay? Again, it's not always somebody getting snatched at a bus station or airport. It's rarely that, okay? Traffickers often begin as friends or significant others of the victims, okay? They promise success, riches, often without a clear avenue of obtaining those things. Traffickers will give the victims clothes, a place to live, a vehicle, other material things that make the victim indebted to the trafficker. So again, these victims, adults or juveniles, they're not being snatched up. They're actively being recruited, pulled away from their families. Again, we're going to talk about some social media sites that this stuff happens on and how. But if this trafficker can get this person to them and make them indebted to them, it's so much easier to hold them. And again, it's easy to get these people indebted to you. The trafficker gives these people a place to live. Promise them, hey, I own my own record label. I'm a producer. I can get you into movies. I'm this, I'm that. Well, they get these people to them. Oh, here's a house. Or you can live in my house. Here's a car. Use this car while I'm not using it. Here's some clothes. Here's $2,000. Get some furniture to fill up your room. Well, once that happens, again, you kind of become indebted to that trafficker. You got to pay him back somehow. The trafficker then will begin to strip all independence away from the victims, making the victims completely dependent on the traffickers. That's where a lot of that pressure goes. This person's already intimidating. He knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a while. Now he's got this person that's indebted to him and dependent. The traffickers will also use love to entice victims. They're going to make them feel that, their boyfriends, their girlfriends, that they care about them. This often is why the trafficker begins the relationship with the victim in an intimate way, to cultivate that trust, that love the victim feels towards the trafficker. It's again, we'll get into more the psychology here in a little bit. And this is where these people are getting recruited. I say these people, the victims. And this isn't, again, these aren't the only sites, and it's not only websites. A lot of the recruitment, again, we're going to go over here in the future, but these are just a few. Instagram, Facebook, Tagged, Craigslist, Snapchat. Seeking arrangements, which is it's just seeking now. TikTok and others. So social media has given essentially traffickers a buffet of victims that they have access to. Before social media, I mean, and the internet, what do these guys have to do? I mean, how are you going to get contact with hundreds of thousands or whatever people? I mean, you couldn't. You'd have to hit the streets and meet them. Well, because of this stuff, these people can just make these accounts, throw 100 lines out there. They only need to get a couple every now and then. A lot of them are going to say, they might see through it, or they may just ignore it. But if they cast enough lines through these apps, they only need a couple. Use those up. They either get recovered, run away, whatever. Throw a few more later. So social media is awesome, but it's also dangerous. Recruitment sometimes comes from other victims and juveniles, unfortunately. So some of these traffickers, they're pretty intimidating people. They're big. I mean, some of these people may be a little intimidated. This guy comes up to them, starts talking to them. It's a lot easier if these traffickers use the young people or other victims to recruit. You know, a victim may be a lot more susceptible to listening to somebody that's their age, dressing nice, flashing cash. Hey, I got somebody that's invested in me. He's got his own business. He'll help you like he helped me. So we're seeing a lot of some of the recruiting coming from the victims. And of course, I mean, it's directed by the trafficker. But again, much of the recruitment is perpetrated by the young people that come from social media. The recruitment can also come from peers at school, right? Misery loves company, unfortunately. So let's go into a case study real quick. So this was a adult trafficking victim. We're going to call her Jane. It's a pseudonym. She's 22 years old. So she begins an online relationship with a male on, I think it was Instagram, if I remember right. He starts telling her everything she wants to hear. They correspond for a little while. Tells her she's beautiful. He cares about her. And again, it starts slow. It's not like, boom, hey, why don't you come work for me on Bissonnette? Well, obviously, she's going to tell you to pound sand, right, if you do it right then. But he starts out slow. Tells her he'll drive from Texas to Indiana to pick her up with a promise she can stay with him, and he's going to help her become independent. And that's where a lot of these victims, unfortunately, get roped into this. They're not dumb. Some are. We all know there's dumb people out there, but not all these victims are dumb. In fact, a lot aren't. There are people that want success. They want independence. They don't want to be living with mom and dad. I mean, this girl, she was 22 and still at home. She doesn't want to be living off mom and dad's dime her whole life. A lot of these people, again, they just lack life experience. So how are they supposed to know about some of this? They haven't experienced it. They want success. And this person, he sounds pretty good. He's got a nice Instagram account. He's offering to help me. So he picks her up from Texas to Indiana, or goes to Indiana and picks her up. So soon after picking her up, he begins forcing her to prostitute to fund their living. So obviously he's going to go up there with money, kind of that facade that I have money, I'm successful. Well, guess what? That money runs up, and he doesn't have it. Well, I guess he does have a job. He's working it right now. She already thinks she cares about him. And I mean, at this point, it's infatuation, right? It's not love. She's young. And he's like, well, you know what? We're out of money. I'm hungry. I want to sleep in the car. If you really care about me, I mean, shoot. There's a lot of people out there that, would do this for their man if you loved me. This starts slowly. Again, Jane's feel as though she owes her trafficker for his initial investment in her. Well, he did drive all the way up here to get me. He gave me $1,000. I'm wearing these nice shoes and I got this purse. So he's applying that pressure. She's away from her family. She does owe him. He takes her cell phone, takes her ID card, and then soon after starts physically abusing her. He starts posting sex ads online, and he would take her to the dates. So if you know, online sex advertisements on websites is absolutely crazy. Again, this is another aspect. I was a little naive when I came into this squad. But I don't know if you know this, there are websites out there. I don't know, like Backpage probably, it's kind of gone. But there's a lot now that are like Backpage, even worse, a lot worse, that are Well, like I've been kind of looking at cars lately. Maybe get a new car. So you go to these websites that sell cars, CarMax or whatever. You can go to these websites and type the car you want in or whatever you're looking for, and whoosh, pages of cars. You just cycle through the colors, what they have on them, what they can do. Just car after car. That's how these websites are now. Websites filled with sex advertisement posted by a lot of times these traffickers of girls. Website after website, thousands of ads you can just scroll through. Which girl do I want? What she does, if she's willing to do an out call, in call. Her a lot of time her rates will be on there, what she charges, and it's explicit. They're not being like covert or inconspicuous. It's straight up as dirty as you can get on these ads because you're trying to talk these guys into buying you. So if you want them to buy you, you got to seem like you are worth the money. So that's what he starts doing with her. He makes the ads, puts them online. He corresponds with the Johns. So the Johns thinking he's texting this. They put their ad or their number in the ad. The guy starts texting the number in the ad. Oh man, this girl, I'm gonna get with her. He's texting the pimp. The pimp is setting up the date. He takes her to the dates. I forget exactly how the family got the tip, but family finds out she's in Texas. I don't know if they call it like a trafficking hotline. Anyway, my squad gets the tip. We find the sex ad. And this is actually the first case I did an undercover. This is my first undercover case. I posed as the John, contacted her, set up the date. I got a hotel room off a Red Roof Inn off the Belt. She shows up, talk to her, make the date. Once the date's made, I give the bus signal. They come in and detain her. So we start the interview right there. She tells us she would do up to 12 dates a day. Now, I'm not saying she was doing 12 dates every single day, but on a high day, she would do about 12 dates a day. She tells us that she made her trafficker about $80,000 in 5 months she was with him. And honestly, that's not all that high. That's a good bit of money, don't get me wrong, but some of these girls are pulling in $10,000 a week. I mean, they don't get to keep any of it. They don't see any of that money, it goes to the trafficker. But she makes him about 80 grand in 5 months. She said she was too scared to run. The trafficker put in the time and effort to put her in a completely dependent situation. Fear is a powerful motivator. Feeling dependent is a powerful motivator. So whereas you say, well, I mean, shoot, once that trafficker drops her off, why doesn't she just run? He's got her ID. A lot of times he keeps her phone. He's already been beating her, and he knows where she lives. He went to Indiana to get her. So those threats of, you run, I'll just go up and kill your family. So what he was doing, I'll go up and kill your family, you run. Again, fear is a powerful motivator. She ended up being trafficked throughout the U.S., including Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, and Texas. But thankfully, we were able to get her out of that situation, and ended up being, her trafficker went to jail that night. So that one worked out good. So your types of trafficker. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. There are people that have been doing this longer than I have that can maybe break them down in even like more specific groups. But essentially there's three major types of traffickers. If you've got your transnational trafficker, these are your guys that working for large, well-funded organizations. That deal in the international buying and selling of girls, boys, and women. Going back to Taken, these are like your stereotypical traffickers. What you think about, snatching up a girl at an airport, taking her to Abu Dhabi and selling her to a prince on a yacht. Okay, again, it happens. Not a whole lot, but it happens. Then you've got your gorilla pimp. These are your guys, these are your traffickers that use force and physical abuse to control their victims. These guys rely on terror to keep their victims working. They beat the girls. They have their other girls beat her if a girl gets out of line. The bottom a lot of times will beat them. So in this industry, they call the game, the trafficking or the pimping industry, on the street they call it the game. What they call the girl that is like second to the pimp, they call her the bottom. I don't know why you would think that was like the girl on the bottom, but no, she's like the second in command. She will often abuse the other girls. They will pay the bottom will then pay the trafficker, and she teaches a lot of the girls. The new incoming girls, she teaches them what to do, how to do it, things of that nature. And then you got your finesse pimp. These are your traffickers that use smooth talk and promises to entice their victims. These traffickers are articulate. They convince the victims that they care about them. Maybe they love them. You know, we can have a life together. All right, they make the victims often think that they're in an intimate relationship with the trafficker. Those are your two you're going to see that we see the most. Your gorilla pimps and your finesse pimps. So case study number 2. This is one that especially parents need to be, everybody, this is one of the biggest cases that I've worked, and this is becoming one of the most prevalent ways juveniles and adults are being trafficked. And it's sad. This is an ongoing case. So Sarah, we'll use her name, we'll call her Sarah. 15-year-old girl, she is from Polk County, Texas. She begins an online relationship on Instagram with an unknown male. He's posing as a 16-year-old white male, cut up, athletic, plays hockey and basketball, tells her she's beautiful, so puts some time in, they chat for a little while. Suspect talks to Sarah. He talks her into sending him some photographs of her. Not necessarily nudes. A lot of times this can just be lingerie, pictures, sexual type pictures. I mean, in this specific incidents, it was nudes. It's not always. So she sends him the pictures. So as soon as she sends him the pictures, boom, he flips the script. Suspect tells Sarah to start engaging in video chats with him, or he's going to leak all her photos online to all her Instagram friends. In these chat sessions, Sarah is forced to perform numerous sexually deviant and explicit acts on herself while she's recorded for up to 30 minutes or more at a time. Now, she can't see him. He knows what he's doing. What he does is he has her download a messenger, some app where they can video. He blacks out his screen and says, it's not working. I just don't want you to see me. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what he tells her because she's being forced to do this. She's terrified. She doesn't want her stuff being released, but she can't hear or see him. He's typing. He's typing what he wants her to do. Throughout this entire video chat, he's telling her what to do. She's terrified, embarrassed, feels like she doesn't have an option. I mean, what would you do? You've got these photos out there that you sent this guy. You want to tell your parents that you did this? Or your friends? You want the pictures leaked? No, she's embarrassed. Hey, maybe if I just pacify this guy for a little bit, he'll leave me alone. Well, that doesn't happen. She ends up doing 10-ish video chats before the incident's reported to law enforcement. I think she confided in her friend. Mom ends up finding out. Mom calls the locals, and the locals contact a trafficking unit. So we begin the investigation, and through obtaining search warrants for the subject's multiple Instagram accounts, I think I found he had, at that time, he had 4 Instagram accounts, possibly a lot more, but I could link these 4 to her. After he tried to blackmail her, she blocked him. He creates a new account, contacts her again, says, you block me again, I'm leaking your stuff. So after I draft up the search warrants to sign, I send them to Facebook because Facebook owns Instagram. I get all the thousands of pages of records from these 4 Instagram accounts, and I start pouring through them. So looking through them, like, oh my goodness, she's not the only one this is happening to. I'm looking through these pages, and there's 10s, then 20s, then maybe 50 victims on just these 4 accounts. He's doing the same exact thing. I'm finding these conversations between him and a girl, and he's doing the exact same thing, threatening them, forcing these girls to engage in these video chats, which we know he's recording and probably selling. So we find out he's doing this so when I find this, I get more and more search warrants. I'm finding I got victims in New York, Idaho, Florida, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. This is starting to get outside my wheelhouse. I have no jurisdiction in those states, so I go to the FBI. Show them the case, and like, oh my goodness, yeah, we'll definitely join you in this investigation. They come on, and we find out that the trafficker is operating, and this is real new. Actually, this case just got some huge developments last week. So yeah, he's befriending a lot of victims, telling them to send photographs. The FBI comes in, And we just recently found out information that this guy was possibly in Toronto, Canada. And this is after months of working it. Yeah, it is painstaking. So we contacted the Canadian authorities, passed the information on to here. Hey, here's some IP addresses. Most of them are VPNs. And unfortunately, it kind of goes into this last line here. The internet makes it incredibly easy to hide. I don't know if you know what a VPN, but it's like a cloaking device for your IP address. It's incredibly useful if like you own a company, right? You don't want people hacking you or tracking you, whatever. Use a VPN, and instead of saying you're in Texas where you're at, it may say you're in New Jersey or something. Well, that's what this guy was doing. That's why it took us forever. Well, we found one IP address that came back to a house in Canada, not a VPN. He must have messed up. Canadians go do the search warrant on his house, and on March 10th, they executed the warrant, found a 36-year-old Sri Lankan national living with his mom and dad in this house. Seize his computers, and find up to 200 victims listed in order from year into folders. So in 2018, he'd have just folders of girls, their name, their age, and what kind of videos they did for him. So the Canadians arrest him, and he's probably out now. Unfortunately, if you don't know this, Canada is extremely liberal. There's a person in Canada right now being held for breaking COVID restrictions. They let this dude out. Charged him 25 counts of like child porn, enticement, extortion. Insane. Judge is like, he's all right. Just let him out. So that's Canada. Anyway, so yeah, that case is still working. Hopefully we're going to get that person extradited to the U.S. because even the Canadian police were like, look, we need to try and get him to the United States because if we don't, he's going to just get a couple years. So that's not appropriate. So again, the internet, in internet land, it's easy to hide. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know where they are. You don't know anything. And this will kind of take us into case study 3. Adults. This involves 2 adults. One from Texas, she's from the Dallas area, and one was from Tennessee. So both are recruited on an online connection site. Both victims were promised modeling type jobs and the ability to make $10,000 a week by the trafficker. And again, he looks legit. They don't know. He's got an Instagram account. He's driving a Ferrari. He looks like he owns his own business. Is he making music videos or something? Is he a rapper? I mean, he looks like he's doing well for himself. Maybe he can hook me up with put me in some music videos or something. So both victims, he gives the victims means to come to Houston, given housing. One, he puts them up in his mansion. Another girl, he puts her in a hotel. Gives them jobs in a club. You're just going to be a cocktail girl for a little bit. I got to get with some of my partners and we'll start getting you some jobs and some music videos. We'll get you set up here soon. Time goes on. Those jobs didn't come. They've been driving his cars for a little bit, spending his money. Soon both victims are forced to start stripping in those clubs they were working at. All the money goes to him. They don't get to keep a dime of it. They try and keep a dime, they get beat. The pimp controlled the victims, where they went, who they talked to, monitored their phones. Again, these aren't dumb women. These two, I interviewed both these girls. And this happened, it'll come back here in another slide, but we'll talk about it real quick. This happened in 2017 when I was still a trooper. I wasn't even in the trafficking unit. I got handed this case because it ended up going cold and then new information and it got passed to me. So anyway, I interviewed them somewhat recently. They're not dumb girls. They were looking for success. They were adults. When this happened, I think they were both like 19. They were recruited by an individual that looked legitimate. And you could think, well, that would never happen to me. I'd see through it. Well, you don't know that. What happens if you fall on hard times? You get in an argument with your parents. They want you out of the house. You did something dumb. Now you owe a lot of money. Well, this guy looks legit. Excuse me. He looks legit. He looks like he's going to hook you up with a lot of money. So both victims were terrified of the pimp and the woman working for him, the bottom, that helped recruit him. Eventually, one gathered the courage to call her father, who in turn called law enforcement. And it's kind of funny. Her dad that she called was a retired Army Ranger who owned his own tactical company up in Dallas. He gets kitted up, starts rolling toward Houston, has a DPS buddy in Dallas that he calls, like, hey, look, this is what's going on. That guy calls the trafficking squad here in Houston. It's like, look, y'all need to get to this club before this guy gets here and starts killing people. So at the time, a couple buddies of mine who were in the squad at the time, the lieutenant, they kitted up, ran to that, it was Heartbreakers Club down in Dickinson. They get there, go into the club covertly, act like they're just patrons. They find the girls and arrest them. You know, they don't want to like let everyone know, hey, we're here. These girls, they tattled on somebody, so let's go. No, they went in, acted like they had warrants or something for them. The rest of the girls got them out of the club and interviewed them. Anyway, so they were recovered at the club, and unfortunately, some of the information they just didn't have on the trafficker. He didn't tell them his real name, obviously. Didn't let him see his ID card. They don't have his real phone number. So we're like, who's your trafficker? Well, these guys are, I hate to say this, they're good. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a while. They know how not to get caught. And no one is immune. So again, I go back to myself when I was a naive guy coming into the squad. You know, I have my own preconceived notions of, you know, what's going to happen, who the victims are, how they come. Well, and again, I was wrong. These victims are not always poor, not always unintelligent. Sometimes they do have a support structure at the house. Again, sometimes they're just lost, maybe. Maybe they're not lost. Maybe they're just real excited to get out on their own. Okay? Very often these victims' they just lack life experience. Well, that's why people always tell you respect your elders. Something comes with life experience. It really does. Whether or not you had a crazy life or not, your elders can teach a lot. Just because of when you hold a job for 30 years, you're married for a certain amount of time, you raise kids, you can't teach that in an afternoon. There's only so much you can gain from your friends at school and the internet. So life experience, it speaks a lot. And once these victims begin to realize what is going on, they may be too afraid to act. Again, so this is why I say they're not always dumb. Fear is a motivator, and so is self-preservation. So a lot of times when these victims get recruited into this, and they realize what is going on, that they no longer are in control of the situation, they will start to rationalize in their heads, yes, I do. I'm in control. I can leave at any time. I chose this. Because no one wants to admit to themselves, I was duped. Right? And sometimes that's what keeps them working. It is so embarrassing and so life-altering to stand up and say, this happened to me, I need help. Because you got to, even us who think we're great, outstanding church people, we're judgmental. Nobody likes to be judged, especially victims of this kind of stuff. So again, that's why the trafficker, cultivates that love and care. Well, it's a horrible situation, but maybe I do choose this. Maybe this guy really does love me. Maybe he is investing my money and a year from now will buy me a car and a new house. Again, that rationalizing in their head is just, it's again, the fear, the sense of being away from family and just the whole, just being hit by a wall, it's difficult. And psychology plays a large role in trafficking, and the perpetrators are well aware of this. Psychology is huge. Some of the classes I've gone to, some of the interviews I've been a part of, it's crazy how much training that these pimps do on the street. They talk to each other, they learn from senior guys, and they know how to control some of these girls. So what's the investigative process? We'll go through this here relatively quick. So a recovery, a child, a victim, or an adult is found and recovered either by law enforcement or us. So how does this happen? When you get them, what do y'all do? So generally, right when we recover them, interview is started. Special agents make contact with the victim, conduct an on-scene interview. These interviews are informal and done as quickly as possible. Obviously, we got to preserve evidence and get the ball rolling. Unfortunately, sometimes these interviews are done weeks or months or even years after the crime took place. I go back to case study 3. Those girls were recovered back in 2017. They couldn't name their trafficker. They go home. They keep on it. They're contacting people who recruited them. Somehow they find this guy's real Instagram, his real YouTube. Then they call us again. Hey, and then this was like August of 2020. So almost 3 years later. Like, hey, look, this is who the guy is now. Well, this is 3 years later. It kind of makes it difficult, but hey, I mean, we definitely want to get this guy. So that is some reasons. So then I start the interviews, call him and do everything. So that's some reasons why it can be years later. And in doing this, talking to these girls, building rapport is of the utmost importance. These victims are told police don't care about them. It's our job to prove that wrong. It's beat into these girls, and that's another reason why they stay. The cops don't care about you. The cops are crooked. They're dirty. They're just as likely to sleep with you and rape you and then leave you. When you pound that mentality into somebody for long enough, they're going to believe it. I mean, shoot, look at society nowadays. And the district attorney's offices we deal with now are half the time more likely to believe the criminals over us. The criminal says it happened, well, it happened. If the cops say it happened, well, where's the video? That's the way it is. A lot of times we start these interviews, the victims don't want to talk, think this is what they chose. Everything that happened, they just chose it. It makes it, again, difficult. That's why you got to build that rapport. When we talk to them, they're either going to say nothing, hey, pound sand, I don't want to talk to you. They may say very little, just enough to start an investigation, but to make it, it's not a very good investigation. We don't have a lot to go on. Or they'll make a full outcry. Here's my cell phone, search it. You'll find the text messages. Here's his name, here's where he lives. And that's great. We want that. Making a full outcry. Outcry, obviously, a claim of being a victim of trafficking or any sex crime. So once they do that, a SANE exam comes in, sexual assault nurse examination. If applicable, we'll take them to the hospital, do a SANE kit. If it's a juvenile, we're going to call DFPS, CPS, get these girls placement. Forensic interview is completed either that night or if they're a juvenile, even an adult. We can't do it that night for some reason. We'll schedule a forensic interview with the Child Assessment Center later on. We start collecting other evidence, start doing workups, possible suspects, start doing surveillance, obtain hotel records, video footage, scour social media, things of that nature. Sometimes all this stuff happens in one shift. We get the girl, we do the interview, we find the pimp, we get the records, we find all the evidence, and it's all done in like a long 24-hour shift. Minus the reports. The reports come later. We compile all the evidence, do all the reports, submit it to the DA's office for prosecution. Keep in mind, though, all these cases are different. That's what I'm definitely learning pretty quick. So many of these victims are either recruited in new ways we didn't know about or trafficked in new ways, so all our investigative techniques sometimes need to deviate. So what are some barriers that make investigating trafficking and getting these victims out? What makes this stuff so difficult? And unfortunately, it is difficult. I'll admit to you right now, the other case I'm working with the FBI is on a pimp in South Houston. Lives in a nice big house. Pimping girls he's running them out of strip clubs, and they're prostituting in the clubs. He's been operating since 2010. The locals have been kind of looking into him, doing what they can. They came to us in 2019 with a big case file. We've been trying to get this guy. We just don't have the means or the manpower. Can y'all take it? I was like, yeah, I'll take it. So I start the investigation. And the FBI comes on board. We identify all these victims. And half the time they don't want to talk. Why aren't they wanting to talk? Again, some of the reasons I've said before, but some that do talk are like, well, I don't know if I want to talk. This guy's been doing this for 10 years. How have you not got him? Go arrest him. He's trafficking people. Go hook him up. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. A lot of barriers in doing these cases. One of them being the lack of training and understanding for law enforcement. Thankfully, this is being rectified. Again, as I said earlier, trafficking is the narcotics of the 80s. DPS did not have a human trafficking squad until 2014. 2014, I mean, that's not that long ago. That's when we had our very first dedicated, this is all you guys do. You're going to do trafficking. And that's the unit I'm in now. So there was not a whole lot of training. Cops were rude most of us were, not the easiest people to talk to sometimes, rough around the edges. We're pessimists. Not the best people to talk to these girls that have been abused. But again, that's being rectified. There's a bunch of training that's going on. I mean, it's really getting better. What we discussed already, victims' fear and distrust of law enforcement. A lot of times we recover these girls and we're there to help. We're like, we are here. I will get you out of this right now. And sure enough, they'll say, hey, pound sand, I don't want to talk to you. Okay. Victims are becoming unwilling or not cooperating later on or retracting their stories. You get a good case, you made an outcry, well, a week later, that didn't really happen actually. Well, actually, it happened like this. It's kind of a barrier. Proving force, fraud, or coercion. When a lot of these victims are saying that, he's not making me do it, I want to. I want to sleep with 50 guys in a week. Get STDs, get beaten, and then not keep my money. I want to do all that. And in their minds, they think they do. They rationalize it. Well, how are we going to prove force, fraud, or coercion to arrest a trafficker when the victim is saying, yeah, they chose it? That's a big hurdle. And then finally, severing the tie with the trafficker post-recovery. Again, this is psychology, and it's insane. Real quick, something to prove this up, why this is so difficult. I think it was late 2019, early 2020. Our squad gets a tip. Girl calls in on the hotline, or she emailed in on somehow. She's being trafficked at a hotel by a pimp. He's beating her, and she's describing just an awful scene. Well, she gives us the hotel they're at. She gives us the room number, and she tells us the car she's driving. And that is amazing. When we get tips, sometimes it's, well, my name is so-and-so, I'm being trafficked in Houston. Okay. So this was amazing. We are like, all right, let's go. We got, jumped in our unmarked cars, go to the hotel. We find the car she said they were driving, and right there at the car in the trunk messing with it is the trafficker. So me and a few of my agent buddies were like, oh man, that's the car. That's most likely going to be him. We game it real quick. We're like, let's just jump out, detain him real quick, and go from there. So we jump out. We're in plain clothes. We jump out, guns out on this guy, prone him out. He had a gun tucked in his waistband. Thank God he didn't do anything stupid. Violence of action, definitely helps. So they detain this guy. I run upstairs to go to the hotel number, or the room she said she was in, knock on the door. And I told my wife about this that day when I came home because it was so amazing. I opened the door, and it doesn't always go like this. She's crying. Oh my God, I got my gun out trying to clear the hotel room to make sure there's nobody else in there. And she's trying to hug me, and she's crying. Thank you so much. I felt like Superman. We do the interview. She makes a full outcry, shows us some disgusting evidence on her phone that this guy did to her, including sexual assaults and beatings. Called the DA, like, oh yeah, we'll take charges on that guy all day. Hit him with weapons charges too. It was awesome. My buddy Larson took this case, Sam Larson. Great guy. He becomes the lead investigator, and a few weeks later after this op, we arrest the guy. He has a bond hearing. Sam has to go to the bond hearing. He wants his bond lowered so he can get out of jail. Well, guess who's there testifying on his behalf? The girl. The victim we recovered, who cried and hugged and showed us all this stuff, a week later is at his bond hearing testifying on his behalf. Because it's Harris County, the judge is like, yeah, she wants him out, why not? Lowers his bond, he's out. We go on our lives working other cases I forget how, it could have been a month, could have been 2 months. I don't think it was that long, but anyway, me and Sam share an office. We're in the same office together. Get to call another bond hearing for this guy. How's he in the bond hearing? He's out. No, he got arrested again. Why did he get arrested again? Violated the conditions of his bond. How? Beat the same girl again. So he has to go to this bond hearing again. And this is a true story. I'm dead serious about this. Guess who's there again? To testify on behalf of the trafficker. Not only that, she wrote a letter to the judge annotating why she thinks he needs to get out. And thankfully, the judge didn't do it this time. But that just shows you that the tie and the psychological hold that these guys have on some of these victims. And how hard is it going to be us now to prove this trafficking case when we have stuff like that going on? It makes prosecution difficult. So real quick, hand in hand, what are some things that go in hand in trafficking? Stuff we don't like to talk about, I know. It's kind of weird. But stripping, dancing. These clubs are prime locations for pimp looking for girls they can recruit onto their teams, not only for recruitment, for prime locations of trafficking. The guys that go to these clubs and think that it's just a good time and those girls want to be there. Now, again, there may be a couple girls in there that want to be there. Maybe don't have a pimp quite yet. But the guy we're looking at in South Houston, that's where he is running his girls. He knows it's dangerous to put them on the internet because cops make dates with girls on the internet. And that's how these girls get recovered a lot of times. We don't really go into strip clubs looking for these girls, and that's how he runs them. Some of these girls dancing at these clubs, they're forced to. All the money they make goes to the trafficker. The owners of these clubs are in on it. We've got some investigations on some clubs because these owners of these clubs know how much money these girls are making. Some of these girls we've talked to, again, the ones that are willing to do some prostitution in these clubs can easily make $10,000 a week. It's degrading. They don't get to keep it, but it's a lot of money. Often these girls dance and they have to recruit other girls. A new girl comes into the club, she's new to dancing, guess what? She doesn't have a pimp, she will have one probably shortly. And pornography. So again, unfortunately because of the internet, porn is huge. Never in the history of mankind has billions of videos been at your fingertips. That's huge demand. Again, somebody is seeing that demand. So a lot of the times these victims are recruited to this business just like a pimp recruiting a prostitute. These girls are promised modeling jobs, how you can just do the soft core stuff, or you just do it for like 3 months, you make $100,000 and we'll get you hooked up into investment or something. You think that happens? No. A lot of times these girls find themselves living in a house with 5 to 6 other girls doing the same thing they're doing, controlled by their manager. Their manager, who gets a portion of their earnings. Well, they owe him. He brought them into the business. He's giving them a place to live, and he's hooking them up with the jobs. And a lot of times this stuff gets worse and worse and worse. They start out with maybe just 1 job a week, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 5, then they're doing some really disgusting, deviant things that they never would have thought they would have done. Again, these aren't stupid people sometimes. These are people that are just down on their luck. They would say, I would never do that. But once they get you in a certain situation, they get you in a place where you feel like you don't have anything left to do, the survival instinct kicks in. And you will find yourself doing things you never thought you would. So again, these girls owe him for bringing them into the business. So unfortunately, we see a lot of trafficking, these victims. I can't, how many victims, I hate to say it, but would say, well, we don't know who the trafficker is. Well, I have porn videos on YouPorn or Pornhub. The guy in one of those videos, that's the trafficker. If you go look at the video, that's him. Sometimes that's how we identify him. Because the online porn thing is huge too. You make a channel on some of these things and it makes a lot of money. Traffickers know that. So what can we do to avoid being a victim? Whole reason we're here. Limit the time spent on social media. And that's where everyone under 30 is like, screw you, dude. But I mean, it's true. We need to limit the time we spend on social media. Now, when I say this, I'm not like, well, I mean, don't ever get on it. But when you live on social media and you are so concerned with how many likes you're getting or how many people follow you, when you get so caught up in that stuff, it becomes a little bit easier to fall in to the showering of praise that some of these people will heap on you. Again, that look legitimate. So limit your time spent on social media. Don't put your whole life story out there. When you voice on social media that you're arguing with your parents, You need money really bad. You're going to provide traffickers with the opportunity to sweep in and appear to save the day. Again, with all empty promises. Avoid corresponding with strangers. And when I say this, I'm like, people you don't know. Well, I say that because you don't know who that person is, because you don't know who that person is. This beautiful girl or a handsome guy messages you. Is that really a beautiful girl or a handsome guy? Or a 36-year-old Sri Lankan national is not a handsome man in Canada. So again, you don't know who you're talking to. Be aware of those who make promises that can provide you a better life, provide you a job without detailing what the job will be, and actively separate you from loved ones. Because again, once you get away from your family, once you're away from that support structure, you're in a place that's new with intimidating people that you now owe. You may be doing things you didn't ever think you would. Keep an open line of communication, right? Parents, close friends and relatives, people you trust. Again, because that's where the life experience comes in. So if you're young and you're being approached by some of these people and it looks legitimate and it looks enticing, go to somebody you trust, that you know, that you've known for a long time. Look, this is what this person's telling me. Does this sound legit? Does this look like something I should pursue? Lean on other people that can have life experience or that you just trust to give you good advice. Remember, victims entice victims with a sense of love and companionship and an oddly placed desire to help. They're going to convince you that they only care about you, when these people are some of the most disgusting, depraved people out there. All they care about is how much money you are going to make them. And then finally here, so how to spot some possible victims of trafficking. So things on this list, don't look at one of them and be like, oh, if I see a young girl or boy with low self-esteem, they're probably a victim of trafficking. Now this is if they have several of these things probably, okay? So victims, they may have tattoos or brands of their victims on them. Like a big P. And again, to people that aren't in this career field, it may be difficult to know that these are brands, but it's very, very popular for a girl, or I'm going to say for a victim to have to get the brand of her pimp. Extremely popular. Seeing girls inappropriately dressed, especially for their age. And again, the way people dress nowadays. I'm talking about generally if this is like a new development. Like this girl, and a week ago she didn't dress like this. A week ago she wore like the skirts to her ankles and a turtleneck or something. And now all of a sudden she's in booty shorts and a tank top. Okay? Seeing a minor girl or young boy with someone significantly older, obviously not a family member. And again, maybe you've known this person, well, they're 20, and now this 45-year-old's hanging around. All of a sudden she's driving a nice car. And again, this is not all inclusive. Just because you see this, it doesn't mean, but again, you see multiple of these things, might want to just look into it a little bit more, right? High school age boy or young girl with unexplained cash, clothes, and expensive items, because we all know in school people want to, I know I was when I was in high school, everybody wants to brag about how much money they have, the clothes they wear, the cars they drive. Well, now all of a sudden this kid has all this stuff. Well, how do they get it? Might tell you it's, they might reference jobs such as modeling, music, the dancing at clubs. That's a big one, if I tell you that. So don't be a victim. Again, I want to really stress the fact that what you think you know now, and however smart you think you are, don't think you're above it, or it can never happen to you. Now, hopefully after something like this, you may be more aware of it, but even still, you always have to be vigilant. Don't be a victim. You see some of your friends getting into situations like something you heard about tonight, help them out. Parents, monitor your kids' social media. That case online, this extortion case, is one of the most difficult case I've been working on. How many messages I read between this Sri Lankan national male and these victims of how many times these victims were telling me, please stop, you're making me want to kill myself. It can happen. None of these girls, and again, some of these victims were Christians. One from this tiny town in Idaho. Never would have thought it would have happened. So again, I hope tonight kind of opened your eyes a little bit, both as a parent and a young person. You know, don't take things at face value, okay? Be aware of what's going on. Keep your eyes open. Up here is the national trafficking hotline number. And I was going to bring them in. I have a stack of cards with me. If anybody has questions in the future, any issues, anything to report, I'll leave some of my cards up here. And after, if you have questions or anything you want clarification on, please don't hesitate to ask. So anyway, I hope y'all learned something from this, that it was insightful. I definitely think it's very important, and I hope to continue doing this in the future to keep putting this information out there. Thank you all, and God bless.
I tell you what, we're going to do of our high schoolers or junior highs. You want to head back to you're over there to the gym. I'll let you guys go back because you want to do that. And then I asked Chris if any parents would like to ask questions that you may have a specific question you'd want to ask that you maybe could do that. Would y'all want to ask? Anybody want to ask any question? You okay with that?